Hey guys, today we're talking about what it would feel like to be a young podracer on a dusty little world. The kind of day where you don't blast across the flats so much as you prepare to, quietly and carefully, with a wrench in one hand and hope in the other. If you like these, make sure to subscribe and tell me where you're listening from. About to fall asleep, working late, or on a long drive under a big sky. So, it's early. That pale blue hour before the sun commits, when the air still remembers night and the sand hasn't decided to be cruel yet. The hangar door is rolled half open, and the breeze coming through it smells like cooled stone, dry brush, and a little bit like metal that slept. Inside, the light is soft and slanted, dust motes slow dancing in the beam. My grav pod waits in the middle of the floor. On its trestles too long, engine nacelles like silver fruit. The cockpits sling between them, cabling bundled neat as braids. It looks almost fast, just sitting there, which is funny because today will be mostly stillness. Breakfast is honest and uncomplicated. A bowl of sweet grain and electrolyte milk. A slice of melon that tastes like morning, and the kind of tea that pretends to be medicinal until the honey forgives it. I eat, perched on the edge of the workbench, feet on a crate of spare bearings. The first sip tells me everything I need to know about the day. It's going to be patient. I pull the canvas cover off my tools and lay them out, one by one, like a deck of small, loyal cards. Torque spanner, socket wand, fiber cloth, coil, tester, ceramic grease, the color of moonlight, a battered little brush that has cleaned more screens than I can count. The routine calms my hands, organizes my head. I talk softly to the engines because machines, like cats, come when you use the right voice. We start with the intake screens. Sand wants to live in everything out here. Screens are the polite fence that asks it to reconsider. I unlatch the cowling, and it swings up with the slow sigh of a door that's being respected. The mesh is peppered with some ordinary grit, some glitter from the old quarry to valleys over. I loosen the frame, ease it out, and brush from center to edge until the weave shines. The little brush ticks softly like rain on canvas. When I hold the screen to the light, tiny hexes line up and the morning looks like a honeycomb. Back in it goes. The latch clicks with the exact sound I was hoping for. Next, repulsor coils. They live under the vented panels like sleeping snakes, tight windings of alloy wrapped around ceramic hearts. I test the first with a handheld meter. The needle rises to the notch I pencil marked months ago, wavers, then settles obediently. Good coil. The second drags its feet, half a volt, shy, sulking. I try a contact polish, a breath of compressed air, a whisper to the universe. The reading perks up, but not enough. I unseat the coil, hold it in my palm the way you hold a grapefruit, and turn it to find the hairline crack in the ceramic. There you are. Not tragic, just deciding to be inconvenient. I pull the small washer kit, choose a replacement insulator, and work the coil back into its cup with the patient pressure you use to pop a stubborn lid. A smudge of ceramic grease, a quarter turn on the retaining ring, and the coil's attitude improves immediately. Meter, needle, up. The warmth that spreads under my sternum is not pride. Exactly. It's companionship. Machines don't love you back, but when you listen, they cooperate, and that feels close enough. The hangar warms by a degree. Shadows shuffle. Outside, someone pedals a trike past with a crate of greens, and the little bell on the handlebar decides to be a bird. I sip tea number 2 at this hour, legal, and move to the thrust vanes. These are thin, finned pieces that adjust outflow and keep the pod from arguing with crosswind. They're not glamorous, but they are the difference between fast and pointing in the right direction. I wipe each with fiber cloth until fingerprints give up, then check hinge play. One vane squeaks an opinionated mouse. A drop of oil, a tiny flex, squeak, gone. Small victory. Exactly my size. Ain't the rattle. Every pod has won the sound that refuses to introduce itself, yet attends every conversation. Mine lives somewhere in the right nacelle, shows up around idle, disappears when anyone important is listening. I set a stethoscope dish against panels and tap with a knuckle. Tap thung nothing Deanie buzz there. The cable harness that runs from the fuel manifold to the cockpit has a tie that's worn smooth. I slide a new monofilament tie under with the caution of a surgeon trying not to wake a dragon. Cinch it, tuck the tail. I thump the panel again. Silence, the good kind. By mid-morning, the sun has found the seam under the door and drawn a bright line across the floor. I roll the left nestle on its trestle a fraction and pop a side hatch to check the plasma inducer, the little cathedral of plates that persuades energy to be helpful. Dust traces cling to the baffles like railway maps. I brush them clean and replace 2 heat-scorched gaskets, their edges brittle as old crackers. This part of the work smells like ozone and warm rock. The air tastes faintly blue. I set the hatch back, thread the fasteners by feel, and think about the first time I ever saw a pod fire both engines. The air shook. The ground agreed. And the pilot did not look like a god. They looked like a person who had learned to listen very, very closely. Yarrow swings by around then the neighbor with the hair like spun wire and the laugh that rattles bolt bins. He leans in the doorway, blinking at the sun, and says, "You still trying to make that thing polite?" I offer him a melon slice and a rag for his hands. He takes both with ceremony, then points at my cockpit sling. You ever think about moving your trim ballast forward? You come out of the ruins, and that nose wobbles like it's arguing with the future. I think about it every time it happens. I say, "Which is fewer times now?" He grunts, "Which is country for well done." He watches while I retention the sling webbing half, a turn here, quarter there until the seat hangs like a thought you're finally sure about. Then he wanders off to buy parts he doesn't need and sell stories that make them cheaper. Late morning means errands. The ion regulator in the starboard engine has been sulking for a week, oscillating, making the whole pod hum in the key of not today. There are three options. Pretend it's fine, it isn't. Buy a new one, very funny, or barter for a salvaged unit that still remembers what it was built for. I shut the hangar, slap dust out of my cap, and head to the scrap bazaar with a canvas, bag, and a hopeful heart. The bazaar is a chorus. Traders under patched canopies, fans pushing tired air. Coils in neat rows, counterweights piled like bread, screens that once filtered stars now catching flies. I haggle for a regulator at a stall that smells like rope and cinnamon. The vendor swears on 3 ancestors and a racing trophy that the unit came from a pod that only kissed a wall. It looks unkissed enough. I pay with credits and a spare bearing set, and we both look like we won something. On the way back, the wind picks up, teasing the top layer of dust into a veil the sun can't quite burn through. By the time I slide the hangar door open again, the day has gone bright and flat. Side is cool enough to be kind. I lay the regulator on the bench, unwrap the cloth like a present I bought myself, and set out the wrenches that will convince it to join the family. Swapping an ion regulator is the kind of job that rewards being in a good mood. You have to disconnect lines that prefer not to coax stubborn fittings without bruising them, and keep the fuel manifold from deciding to drip at the exact moment you're trying to be graceful. I brace the starboard nacelle with a shoulder, loosen the mount bolts one at a time, and introduce the new old part to the housing. It does not fit at first. Nothing worth anything ever does. I breathe, rotate, try again. Quarter turn, clunk. It seats with a soft, specific thud of an answer. Lines on, clamps snug, sealant bead, neat enough to impress exactly no one but me. I wipe everything twice, then once again, because oil hides in corners like cats at the regulators. Status light winks uncertainly, and then commit to a steady green. I allow myself a smile and a mouthful of lukewarm tea. It tastes like victory wearing comfortable shoes. Afternoon leans over the hangar threshold and asks if we'd like to test the patient. Not a run, just a gentle fire. I wheel the nestles off the trestles and onto their skids. Check that nothing living can crawl under anything fatal. And tie the pod by 2 tethers to the anchor rings sunk in the floor. A test fire is choreography. Fingers on Toggle's voice. Low, shoulders loose, attention wide. I slide into the sling, clip in, rest my hands on the yoke, and feel the faint give of cables that know me. Left prime, I say, because it helps to tell the air what you're about to do. The left engine ticks through its startup like a schoolchild reciting. Fuel whispers, the inducer glows. And then the repulsors push just enough to raise dust in a polite halo. A soft, rising hum presses against the hangar walls and comes back warmer. Right prime. Its twin joins in, a few hertz off until the regulator remembers itself. Meant to be a chord. My ribs resonate. The floor approves. The floor approves. I ease both throttles down until the humming settles back into a purr, and then into a long exhale that sounds almost like relief. Heat drift rises in slow sheets. I sit still, a breath longer, listening for the little noises that only happen after a run. The tick-tick of cooling plates. The lazy sigh from a relief valve that didn't have to work very hard. The tiny clink as a washer remembers it's round. This is the moment when problems admit they exist. None do. I unclip, pat the nacelle with the back of my fingers. Too hot for palms, yet and grin in the way you grin when a plan politely works. Post-fire checks. I love these. Panels off, eyes soft. I run a finger along every joint and bring it to my nose. No fuel. No scorched insulation, just warm metal and a hint of ceramic grease. Torque paint on the fasteners still lines up with its partner marks. Those little orange dashes, like birds in formation. The tethers haven't chewed their anchors. The braided earth straps still sit like musical strings, tuned and tidy. The regulator's green light watches me like a cat that has decided to trust. Again, good dot. I should stop there. Of course I don't. There's a hairline in the primary fuel line's sheath I've been pretending not to think about because pretending is cheaper. I fish the inspection mirror out of the tray, angle it under the manifold and let the sun find the scratch. Not deep yet, but the desert gnaws small things into big ones if you give it time. I wipe my hands, lock the hangar, and head back toward the bazaar before my good sense can negotiate a delay. The afternoon market runs louder than the morning one. Like the same song with more drums, I weave through stalls, selling things that were once parts, and parts that were once things fan belts braided into baskets, thread spools wound with copper hair, a mountain of fasteners in a bin labeled probably. The hose vendor is a quiet woman with a ledger mind. She sizes me up, then the line I've brought, and pulls down a braided composite rated a grade higher than I can afford. She names a number that leaves room for haggling. I counter with coin and a promise to bring her a slice of Yarrow's famous orange bread next week. I add 2 heat socks and a handful of proper clamps, because there is no point in buying a door and then locking it with twine back in the hangar. The day has gone gold at the edges. I chalk a rectangle under the pod so dropped fittings have somewhere bright to land. The old line releases with a long, sticky sigh. I catch the little hiss of trapped air and close the valve gently, like shushing a child. New hose goes in with that satisfying reluctance that means the tolerances are right. Clamps, snug, heat sock slit down to guard the elbow near the exhaust. Fingers crossed, valve open, no weep. I thumb the primer and the gauge nudges the good numbers. Patient and firm. Better. The sun taps out early in the desert, slipping behind the ridge, like a coin dropping into a well. I hang 2 lanterns on the rafters, and their warm cones turn the hangar into a friendly chapel. Night brings its own list. Alignment, trim. Steering vector, the unglamorous arithmetic that keeps speed from becoming a sermon at your memorial. I drag out the string rig, 2 tall stands, a spool of bright line, and a box of shims cut from an old crate. The string runs from the tips of the Nassau's back, past the thrust vanes, to a chalk mark on the floor. When the lines across both engines and the mark on the floor agree, the pod will fly straight without asking me to negotiate every pebble. I make the first measurement, squinting as if that might move atoms. The starboard thrust vector sits half a degree, outboards small, on paper, loud, at speed. I loosen the mounting bolts, one by one, half turns all around so the load shares the news, and tap the housing with the heel of my hand. Tunk. The sound changes as the metal settles. I take another measure, closer, a whisper of shim under the aft edge, a lick of ceramic grease so the adjusters don't complain, and then everything finds the new center, like a compass needle finding north. Yarrow shows up again with a lantern of his own and 2 bottles of water he pretends are for him. "Heard you went shopping for a hose," he says, which means the bazaar gossip speed is still working. He props the lantern on a crate and crouches to sight along the string. Jor, a hair shy on port. I love him for saying it and hate him for being right. We fuss. It's the kind of fuss that builds friendship. Me on the spanner, him on the string. Both of us talking to the pard the way farmers talk to weather. At last, the lines read perfect enough that we both make the same small, satisfied noise and pretend. We didn't, while he tells me a story about a racer who tried to win by polishing his helmet. Spoiler, the helmet won nothing. I tuck a lead shot pouch farther forward beneath the sling to bias the nose into the steady. 1/2 kilo, no more. The pod settles with a posture that looks honest. Yarrow takes his empty bottle, salutes the engines, and wanders back into the night, muttering about bread and bolts. Under lantern light, the cockpit sling becomes a soft place. I slide in, buckle the 4-point, and lay my palms on the yoke. Don't start anything yet. I just sit and let the day take inventory. Grease under nails, solvent on the back of the tongue. The faint rasp of the lantern wicks. Somewhere outside, a dog practices being brave at the horizon. My bones hum the memory of idle. It feels truly like bedtime. But one more test fire will sleep better than I will. I crack the front door to vent and tie back the canvas so the lanterns don't complain. Left prime, I say again. The engine wakes with a confident, low note of someone who has already done this once and liked it. Right prime. The twin joins, cleaner this time, the new regulator holding it, steady like a hand on a shoulder. I bring both up to that careful point where the pod just thinks about lifting the tethers, take a whisper of load. Anchors creak the happy creek, and dust eddies draw maps around our skids. The thrust vanes trim with tiny clicks, no wobble. The strings stay motionless. It's the sound of a machine quietly agreeing to be a partner. I ease everything down. Silence grows like moss. When heat stops shimmering, I walk the pod from stern to nose with the lantern held low. The way you check a child in the night. Is the blanket right? Is the breathing easy? Is the dream kind? All, yes. There's a temptation to drag the trailer out and tow the pod to the flats for a 5-minute hover under stars. Another day, I will. Tonight, I honor the rule that machines and people share and the day on a success while it still belongs to you. I coil the strings fold the stands, roll the tool mat with a neatness that makes tomorrow kinder. The clipboard gains 3 new lines, fuel line replaced, trim ballast plus 0.5 kilograms FWD, starboard vector aligned. I underline test on flats at dawn, because mornings make better choices than nights. I wash my hands in the small sink until the water runs. Clear and the day, let's go. The soap smells like citrus and ambition. I blow out the lanterns, and the hangar slips into that blue dark where edges soften and decisions go quiet. Outside, the air has cooled enough to be velvet. To horizon. Over in the sleeping town, someone strums a tired guitar, a 3-chord lullaby for anyone who wanted one. I stand in the doorway a while, breathing with the engines that are not breathing, and it feels like we're all doing the same job, resting so we can be excellent later. I pull the door down to a gentle thud, throw the bolt, and let the night keep watch. In my pocket, a washer I didn't need rattles a little. I decide to keep it there as a lucky coin until it's needed, which, with machines, is sooner than you think and later than you fear. Tomorrow, there'll be cold grain and a sky like an empty page. We'll tow out to the flats while the light is still thin. String the markers and see if the math we did by lantern is the kind you can write across sand at speed. For now, bed. For now, sleep that smells faintly of oil and dust and metal, that is loved enough to behave. Morning comes back, soft and pale, the kind that lets you keep a piece of sleep in your pocket while you work. I wheel the trailer around while the town is still exhaling dreams. Hitch the pod with straps that have learned our names and tow toward the flat, wide white table where the sky comes down to rest its elbows. The road out is a string of small decisions. Avoid that rut, wave to that shepherd drone. Mind the place where the wash cuts through and pretends it's still a river. Out here, the light lifts in layers. First blue, then a honey color that turns. Every dust puff into a blessing. We set the shade sail first, a triangle of canvas that makes its own cool weather. Stakes go in with the polite thunk of wood meeting salt hard ground. I unload the marker pole's bright cloth ribbons, tied at the top end pace, out a gentle slalom-like handwriting on a calm day. Nothing sharp. The goal is steadiness, not glory. The morning breeze carries the smell of old rain. Even though the sky hasn't decided on any, the pod slides off the trailer onto its skids with a hush that makes me think of librarians. I check the tether rings sunk into the flat clay, run the ropes just in case the first lift wants to be enthusiastic. Walk the circle one last time. Intakes locked. Lines tight. Vanes free. Ballast still tucked forward where we left it. The string rig comes out again for a last glance. Both lines agree that reality hasn't shifted overnight. Good. I sit in the sling. The harness kisses collarbone and hips and settles like a memory. Gloves on, goggles down on the cap brim. 4. Later, breath slow. Left prime, I say to absolutely no one, and the engine answers like a dog who understands tone. Right prime, the twin joins, clean as new paper. I bring both up until the skids whisper, then stay there. The pod is a friend leaning into your shoulder without needing anything. My hands map small circles on the yoke-tiny S-turns at hover height feeling for that moment when the steering listens without gossip. The nose tracks smooth, a polite metronome. The ballast change was right. I nudge forward. The tethers slacken and sway. The anchors stay bored excellent. The pod moves like a thought that remembers to be considerate. We trace the first ribboned pole with an arc the size of forgiveness, come back the other way, and thread the second. The engines hum in a key that suggests work without complaint. Dust lifts only as much as pride allows. When the cross breeze tickles the starboard side, the thrust vanes answer with 3 soft clicks, and the hull drifts a finger's width back toward center, as if the air had apologized. I grin a little and forget to stop. After 2 laps, I ease down and cut. The only sound for a moment is wind pawing at the sail. Heat rises in sheets you can see if you tilt your head the right way. I do the walk around, again hand flat on Nassau. Ear almost to panel. Eyes soft, so small, wrongnesses volunteer. I jot veins polite on the clipboard and drink water that tastes like crushed coins and gratitude. Yarrow pulls up in his old utility buggy with a paper-wrapped loaf steaming on the seat beside him. Brought the orange bread, he says, like a hero who has slain something and doesn't want a parade. We break it with both hands under the shade sail and eat in that companionable quiet that bread demands. He watches my next hover with his head cocked the way birds consider seashells. You're not fighting it anymore, he says, which isn't quite praise and is better. We start cursive drills, necks broad, looping figure eights that keep the engines honest and the wrists humble. It's a lesson in restraint. Stop just short of the pleasure of a tighter turn. Give the veins room to think. Let your breath be the pencil. The flats become a sheet of invisible calligraphy. A tiny tremor tickles the yoke when I cross my own wake. I lighten my grip, and the tremor forgets why it came. Dust makes faint wreaths in the air, and then lays itself back down, sleepy and cooperative. By mid-morning, the light goes white, and the distance starts to shimmer. We bring the pod in and let it nap while we look at numbers. The ion regulator holds steady. Temperatures never get rude. The coils look like they're believing in themselves. I wipe a thumbprint off a gauge, and it feels like saying grace. 2 kids from town coast up on sandbikes, wide-eyed and helmeted like beetles. They park at an approved distance and pretend the approved distance is where they wanted to park anyway. Does it go fast? One asks. Already knowing the correct answer, it goes exactly fast enough when it's ready. I say, which is both true and a parental tone I did not plan to use. I show them the ribbon poles and the string rig and the ballast pouch. We talk about patience as a kind of aftermarket part you can't buy and have to install anyway. They nod solemnly, then race each other back to Wartown like small, joyful mistakes against the horizon. The sun leans into noon with intent. I pull the sail to a slightly different angle and drop the pod's nose so the cockpit sling gets a little shade. Lunch is melon and salt and the last of the tea which has abandoned any pretense of being hot and is perfectly fine about it. While I chew, I retie one tether with a double fisherman's, not because it seems like the right sort of afternoon superstition. A faint breeze finds the back of my neck and says, "This is your last good hour before the heat starts sharpening. We use it to work on posture." It turns out you can fly crooked even when the pod is true hunched. Shoulders have opinions about steering. I relax the muscles between shoulder blades like untying a ribbon. The pod thanks me with smoother entry into the turns. I lower my elbows a finger's width, and the nose stops hunting. A small pad added under my left boot evens out pressure on the floor stirrup. Yarrow pretends to nap and is absolutely watching. All of this through slitted eyes. Tiny, he says, which is his word for important. There's a short, gentle run to cap the session. We set the poles a breath farther apart, just enough to let the pod stretch its ankles. Engines to hover, then forward. Then a careful lift of the throttle nut to impress, just to find the place where chatter becomes tone. We breathe together. The track smooths out under us. At one point, one stopped noticing the yoke entirely, and the pod threads 3 poles with that sweet, mindless alignment that makes people write poetry about machines. I refuse to write poetry out loud, but I let the feeling take a slow lap of my ribs. When heat finally becomes a suggestion we should listen to. We put everything down in order: engines, then toggles, then harness. Dust returns to the ground in cooperative flurries. The flats regain their plain face, unbothered by our practice. We coil ropes, pull stakes, and load the poles. The shade sail comes down with a billow like a sigh. I leave 2 careful bottles of water for any future selves who forget to pack enough, which I know from painful experience they will. On the drive back, the day unspools through the window like a long ribbon of beige with interesting edges. I stop once where the road crests arise and look back. The marker tracks are already fading. That's the lesson written into this place. Even the best lines you draw disappear. What you keep is the hand that drew them. The hangar receives us with its familiar cool. I log the session: esterns clean, ballast perfect. The pod goes up on trestles for a lazy afternoon cool down, and I sit on the floor with my back against a crate, head tipped to the side like a cat discovering sun. A single fly bumps the window slowly, as if trying to remember why the outside exists. I think about tomorrow, not races yet, just a longer string of poles, a few soft accelerations, teaching the veins how to make better decisions than my excitement will. Yarrow leaves, the last 2 slices of orange bread on the bench, with a note that only says fuel. When the shadows finally go long and blue, I pull the door down to a hand's breadth and let a bar of evening lie across the nacelles. Somewhere a storm is shouldering up behind the far ridge. You can taste it before you can see it: iron and old stone, a guest who brings their own chair. I wiped my hands one last time, stacked the wrenches in their roll with the same small care I used on the coils, and rinsed the dust from my throat with water that tastes like reputation earned, modest, necessary. Before bed, I sit in the sling in the dark and let my fingertips rest where they'll rest tomorrow. The hangar breathes. The engines tick as they cool. Imaginary or real, I don't check. I practice one slow inhale, one slow exhale, the way the pod likes to be asked. Fast is for later. Today was 4 straight lines that stayed straight, and circles that closed where they began. On the way out, I touch the cowl with 2 knuckles. Good day, I tell it, and because machines, like cats, understand tone better than words, I feel. The day nod back. The storm arrives in slow negotiations, a gray wall at the edge of the valley that keeps deciding to be dignified instead of dramatic. I wheel the pod deeper into the hangar, clip 2 extra tethers because caution is a cheap habit, and pull the door down until only a letterbox of daylight remains. Air sneaks under it and brings the smell of iron and wet stone. The promise of a clean world. Somewhere down the street, tarps flap like big sleepy birds learning to be serious. Inside, rain on the roof becomes a soft drum lesson. It starts with brushes, moves to sticks, never reaches cymbals. I use the rhythm to guide one last piece of housekeeping. I rewrap the yoke grip with a fresh strip of braided tape, stretching it smooth so there's no seam to print on my palm during long runs. I add a dab of thread lock to a bolt that has always wanted to gossip. I label the drawer that holds the gaskets I mislabeled last month. Because future me is a person I'm trying to treat better. The storm settles in and the hangar turns warm and dim, a cave with good manners. I make tea in the little kettle that scorches the bottom if you dare it, and set it on a crate beside the cockpit sling. For a while, I just listen, the patter, the occasional run of water racing along the gutter, the relaxed creak of the rafters, the slow breathing of an old building, remembering rain. The pod looks calmer in this light, like a big, slightly vain dog that's content to nap while you read. Yarrow stops by with a rain cape and the kind of grin people wear when they've accidentally done the right thing. He hands me a rag-wrapped, jar-pickled citrus his aunt makes sand, frowns at the door as if scolding it will make the weather polite. Even the dust is washing its face, he says, peering at the nasals as if the storm might be cleaning them too. We split the last slice of orange bread in the half-light and talk about nothing important where the goats climbed during the last flood. How the bazaar vendor's cat has figured out the exact spot the generator warms first, whether the wind farm will ever get the right bearings for that one turbine that sings when the rain thins to a listening hush. The hangar smells like wet canvas and tin and a faint green note from somewhere that must be patience. I unlatch the door and roll it up to the first rib. Fresh air folds in, cool and rinsed. The whole valley looks a shade bluer, like someone turned down the sun's temperature a notch. Puddles underline everything. In the gutter outside, a line of ants performs a rescue operation for a crumb with the determination of a small army. The flats will be slick until morning, and that's fine. I'm not hungry for speed. I'm hungry for closure, the soft kind you can sleep on. I decide on a twilight ritual, one careful dockside hover just outside the hangar, more a bow than a performance. I roll the pod to the lip, leave the skids on dry concrete and set to lanterns at a safe distance, their flames small golden planet. The first start after rain always tastes sweeter, left prime. The engine gathers itself like someone standing, stretches, and speaks. Right, prime. The twin wakes a beat later, voice rounder in the damp air. I lift them only to the level where gravitics feel light-footed and the pod forgets that concrete is a noun. We hover in place, and the puddles just beyond the threshold jitter like coins in a fountain. I lean the yoke a thumb's width to the left, then right, and the pod pivots like a thought turning its head to listen. There's no drama, just presence, the honest weight of a machine that knows where it ends and air begins. 4:30 slow. Breaths, I hold us there. Not the eager purr of dawn, but a low, companionable tone that says we did enough. When I ease the throttles down, the silence that returns is soft and deserved. The afterheat feels gentle on my shins. I pat the nacelle with 2 knuckles and imagine the pod already asleep. Evening slides over the ridge and settles across the town like a blanket. Windows discover their inner light. Somewhere, a radio chooses a song from 3 decades ago and gets it exactly right. I log the day stormbreak. Trim held, hover steady after rain. Nothing to apologize for. The clipboard feels heavier in a good way, like a book that now knows how it ends. I hang the harness to dry, coil the extension cord in neat loops, and set the wrenches back in order a small, shining parade. There's one last tradition. I take the lucky washer from my pocket and balance it on the lip of the intake screen, right where I'll see it in the morning. It's an ordinary ring of metal, weightless on any scale that matters. But it remembers where it's been. Bottom of a bolt bin, corner of a pocket, under my thumb, while an idea aligned by lantern light. Objects keep stories if you let them. I walk the block home slow, because slow is a speed that allows you to notice. The ground has learned its reflections again. A child splashes a small universe out of a puddle and laughs with their whole body. The air tastes like rain and shy stars. At the corner, old Mrs. Taroo is bringing in her plant pots. She nods at me with the dignity of royalty and says, "You're the one with the blue engines. I've been called worse." I bow back, inside. My little room over the bakery. I set the kettle and lean on the sill. The storm has left a fringe of cloud that the moon stitches with silver thread. I think about the morning's figure eight, the way the pod felt when it stopped being a contraption and became a conversation. I think about the day Yarrow will stop grunting in approval and just nod, which will mean something I'll pretend not to understand. I think about the first real race knot, the dangerous kind, but the community kind with flags stuck in barrels and children assigned to wave them like wind. Some weekend soon, when the market is fat and the air is behaving, we'll line up side by side, and I'll know I'm not racing them. Not really. I'll be racing last month's version of me, who didn't know how to listen this well. Tea arrives. It tastes like closure, lemon and warmth, and a hint of metal from the kettle I never quite cleaned. I sit on the floor with my back against the bed and feet on the rug that sheds like an apologetic cat. My hands are stained in the creases with the faint gray of graphite and the secret blue of sealant. I think I'll always love those colors. I write 3 lines in the notebook I keep for days that deserve lines. Change only one thing at a time. The machine will tell you which. Begin and end with kindness. Parts remember. Fast is a thank you, not a demand. When I close the notebook, the room feels a little more like a room and a little less like a cockpit I forgot to leave. I wash slow, scrub the day out from under my nails, let the water run over, wrists that held steady. In bed, the ceiling has a small crack that looks like a map of the route to the flats. I decide it's accurate. The bakery below clicks and breathes, cooling itself. Bread and engines sleep on similar schedules. Just before I drift, I think of the pod in the dark hangar, tethers slack, lanterns mel, fading, a washer glinting at the edge of an intake like a full stop at the end of a tidy sentence. Tomorrow will be another early, another checklist, another few degrees of better. No drama, no glory, just the warm arithmetic of practice, the kind that builds a life without shouting about it. Outside, a last drop finds the roof and plinks like a muted bell. I count to 3 the way I do with the throttle, 1 for left, 1 for right, 1 for both together, and sleep lands as lightly as hover height, holding me exactly still above the day's smooth ground,